Okay, so I'm going to start with Dave. Let's talk a little bit about my son Dave. Um, Dave was born January 5th, 1987. Um, his father and I were teenage parents, statistics at the time. We raised him, actually, we raised him really good. We weren't married or anything, but we we were both very intelligent. We both spent a lot of time with our son. We both tried to teach him different things. I did a lot of camping and stuff. His father is a musician and very technical, and I read a lot of books, and Dad did a lot of hands-on. So basically, Dave was really well-rounded. When he was about 15, we started going to a campground that David calls Hippiewood, and from there we started going every year, and it became almost like our religious retreat because we'd get grounded and we'd release all of that negative energy that happens during a full year, and he would go back to school when he was a teenager and be like, I don't understand, that was so last year, why are you still so mad? And didn't quite get people, which I always thought that was a beautiful thing. David was very musically inclined. He played the bass, he played drums of all kinds, very community oriented, always there to give a helping hand. Of course, he was also a kid, so he liked his video games and all that. He got a little bit older, and he was working decent jobs. He was becoming an apprentice electrician. He had this green Thunderbird car that everybody called Thunder Chicken because it was an absolute beast. He was a good kid. He was happy. He smiled. He danced. He was a free spirit. He thought outside of the box, but yet he thought all kinds of things outside of the box. So he was always a great conversationalist. He gave the best hugs. And basically he started to change, and his father and I, we weren't together. We haven't been together since we were teenagers. So by the time Dave was in his late teens, early 20s, he was living at his dad's. He'd come visit me. He was cool. I mean, he was a good kid, and smart. I mean, really smart. Very much into mechanics and electricity and how things worked, and very, very smart. And then he started partying like kids do, and we found out that it was to try to figure out which reality was which, but we didn't find that out until much later, much too late. But he started, he started changing. He started acting weird. But he ended up at camp and ended up flipping out and getting into a fight with his best friends, and thinking that everybody was out to kill him, and all kinds of craziness. And he didn't want me called, though I lived 25 minutes away. He wanted his dad called, and that was 2 hours away, and his dad came down in the middle of the night and took him home. And then the next day he was brought to me, and he was still all freaked out, and something really changed that night. And things that used to be something for us to go look at to discover became dangerous and scary, and we didn't understand. We didn't understand what was going on with Dave. He would stay at his dad's, and he would, Dad and him were like just two bachelors living in a house, so they didn't do a lot together, but they did a lot together. They talked to each other as they each went their own ways and went to the computers and did their thing. And basically, Dave, like, all of a sudden he couldn't hold a job. He couldn't do labor ready anymore. He did labor ready off and on for 2 years, but very often he couldn't go back to the same place because he didn't really know how to work anymore. Something was wrong. But we couldn't prove it because we couldn't prove it. I mean, it's not like Labor Ready's going to come give us a review, Then he didn't like being out at my place because I was out at Pine Grove out in Stockton, New York, which is really rural, like Amish area. And he felt like he was trapped there because his car no longer worked and he wasn't able to hold a job anymore to pay for it. And you know how that goes. And he went back to his dad's, and then his dad and him would start fighting, and then Dave ended up taking off, and he rode his bike from Tonawanda, New York, down to basically almost Youngstown, Ohio. And he ended up having tire issues because he was carrying too much stuff, and it was really crazy because I was hearing about it as he was going, and I couldn't. He was 23. What do I say? No, you can't go. Obviously, he's out of here. So he ended up taking off and going down, and he ended up in Ohio with friends of mine. Well, friends of ours, but friends of mine. And he was there for quite a few months. And then, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I think he got either asked to leave or something along those lines, and he ended up back at his dad's. And then he ended up walking the Erie Canal once for quite a few months, and then he came back and he walked the Appalachian Trail once, and he OD'd on aspirin, and we ended up, I mean, like, there's just been some crazy stuff that's gone on over the past few years. Anyways, when he did OD on aspirin because of his wisdom teeth, it was in Kingston, New York. I was living in Myrtle Beach at the time, and I came up to go get my son, and it was in July. We came up, and he was on a 72-hour evaluation after potential suicide because he took too much aspirin, and he passed it, and they just gave him to me, and I took him down to South Carolina, and he was staying with me and Fritz and Smokey to be exact, and we were down there, and we got him into counseling immediately, and he was going. In the first 3 weeks it was good, and then all of a sudden the counselor went on vacation, and all of a sudden he was like, well, if they're not there, obviously I don't need to do this, and that was that. It was done. And within about 2 weeks of not being with the counselor, he ended up basically threatening Smoke, and it's not that Smoke was scared of him, but you don't threaten people. You just don't do that. So he got asked not to come back because this was right around my birthday, and my grandmother had passed away, and I was going back to New York for the funeral, and obviously he was going with me. So the three of us went to New York, and we did the funeral, and afterwards Dave wanted to be dropped off on the Appalachian Trail, and he ended up so loaded down. I don't know how he was carrying everything. And he ended up walking to DC. And from there, Christmas came, and he ended up losing everything and turned out going back to New York. And I'm sorry, I have to stop because my phone is blinking, and that means that something's going on with this recording, and I'm new at this. So I'm going to stop. This is part 1. All right, bye.